The first time I realized my daughter was ashamed of me was on a Tuesday afternoon in September. I had just finished a major cleaning contract downtown and decided to surprise Gabby by bringing her favorite Colombian empanadas to her apartment, near Northwestern. My hands were still raw from the industrial cleaners, but I'd taken the time to change out of my work clothes and fix my hair. I even put on the gold earrings my mother had given me before I left Bogotá all those years ago. As I approached her building, I spotted her laughing with a group of friends on the front steps. My heart swelled with pride. My beautiful, brilliant daughter, the first in our family to attend college, surrounded by what looked like a magazine photoshoot of privileged American youth. I called out her name, waving the paper bag of still warm food. The smile vanished from her face so quickly it was like watching a light switch flipped off. She whispered something to her friends, then hurried toward me, blocking my path before I could reach the steps. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Her voice was tight, barely above a whisper. "I brought your favorite," I said, still smiling despite the knot forming in my stomach. "Empanadas from Rosa's, the ones with the special sauce you love." She glanced back at her friends, who were watching us with curious expressions. One of them, a tall blonde girl, called out, "Everything okay, Gabby?" My daughter's response changed everything between us. "Yes, Elena was just dropping off some food. Thanks so much." She took the bag from my hands and gave me an awkward pat on the arm, not a hug, not even a proper thank you. Just a pat, like I was the family dog who had fetched the newspaper. Elena, not Mom. And I understood everything in that moment. To these people, I wasn't Gabriela Morales' mother. I was just Elena, possibly the cleaning lady, or some family friend. Someone whose connection to Gabby needed to be minimized, hidden away like a shameful secret. I stood frozen as she turned, back toward her friends, my heart cracking along familiar fault lines that had been forming for years. This wasn't the first time, just the most blatant, the most public. "Enjoy the empanadas, Gabriela," I said, making sure to use her full name, the one I had given her, the one that connected her to her heritage, to me. Then I walked away, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall until I was safely inside my car. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I came to Chicago 25 years ago with nothing but a suitcase full of dreams and a fierce determination to create a better life. I was 23, barely speaking English, and pregnant with Gabby. Her father had disappeared the moment I told him about the baby, and my parents, strict Catholics from a small town outside Bogotá, had made it clear they couldn't support my mistake. Those first years were a blur of exhaustion. I cleaned hotels during the day and office buildings at night, carrying Gabby with me when I couldn't find someone to watch her. I'd set up a little play area in the corner of whatever room I was cleaning, singing Colombian folk songs to keep her entertained while I scrubbed toilets and emptied trash cans. Even now, I can close my eyes and see her tiny form fast asleep on a makeshift bed of clean towels in the hotel housekeeping closet, or coloring quietly under a desk while I vacuumed around her. We lived in a tiny studio apartment in Pilsen, where cockroaches scattered when you turned on the light and the heating failed every winter. But I made it home. I hung colorful fabrics on the walls, filled the windowsill with potted herbs, and saved every penny I could. When Gabby started preschool, I used the hours she was away to take English classes at the community center and clean even more houses. By the time she started elementary school, I had built up a small but loyal clientele of private homes in the wealthier neighborhoods. I remember the first time I brought home more than $1,000 in a week. I spread the cash on our fold-out bed and just stared at it, crying with pride and disbelief. That night, I took Gabby out for ice cream and promised her that someday we would have a real house with a yard where she could play. It took 3 more years of backbreaking work, But I kept that promise. I saved enough for a down payment on a small foreclosed house in a neighborhood that nobody wanted yet. It needed work, so much work, but it was ours. I painted every wall myself, replaced broken tiles, and learned basic plumbing from YouTube videos. On weekends, Gabby would help. Me? Her small hands covered in paint, her laughter echoing through rooms that were finally ours alone. "Mommy, are we rich now?" she asked me once, as we ate dinner on the floor of our new living room because we hadn't bought furniture yet. "No, mi vida," I told her, "but we're on our way, step by step." Those were the good years. Gabby was proud to be my daughter then. She would tell her teachers and friends about how her mom owned her own business, even if that business was just me with a bucket of supplies and a growing list of clients. She would help me fold flyers advertising Elena's cleaning services and practice the English phrases I struggled with. I remember her 8th birthday party, the first one where we could invite her whole class to our house. I had saved for months to make it special. There was a piñata hanging from the backyard tree, homemade Colombian food spread across tables I had borrowed from neighbors, and a cake shaped like a book because my Gabby already loved to read. One of the mothers, a lawyer whose house I cleaned, pulled me aside during the party. "Elena, have you considered expanding?" she asked. "I know several people who are looking for reliable cleaning services. You could hire help, create a real company." The idea terrified and exhilarated me. I had never thought beyond the day-to-day struggle to provide. But that night, after all the children had gone home and Gabby was asleep, surrounded by her new gifts, I sat at our kitchen table and made a business plan on the back of a grocery receipt. Morales Cleaning Services officially launched 3 months later. I hired 2 other immigrant women I knew from my English classes, invested in professional equipment, and created proper contracts with the help of that lawyer mom, who became my first business mentor. Within a year, I had 5 employees and had expanded to small business clients. Gabby was my little assistant through it all. She would help me with paperwork, translating things I didn't understand, proudly telling people that her mom was a business owner. On school vacations, she would come to the office I had set up in our converted garage, doing her homework at a small desk next to mine. It was around middle school when things began to change. Gabby started attending a magnet school across town, where most of the kids came from wealthy families. Suddenly, my daughter, who had once proudly introduced me to everyone, became quiet when I picked her up. She would walk quickly to the car, head down, barely acknowledging me until we were driving away. "Why don't you ever wear nice clothes like the other moms?" she asked me once, her voice small but the question huge between us. I looked down at my jeans and simple blouse. They were clean, neat, but definitely not designer brands like I saw on the other women at school events. "These are nice clothes, Gabby," I said, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. "They're clean and they fit. Well, that's what matters." She rolled her eyes in that preteen way that cuts straight to a mother's heart. "You wouldn't understand. You don't know what it's like." What she didn't understand was that I could have afforded nicer clothes by then. The business was doing well, surprisingly well. I had 15 employees, contracts with several downtown office buildings, and had just been featured in a local business magazine as a success story. But every extra dollar went into savings or investments, carefully managed with the help of a financial advisor who had once been a cleaning client. I was planning for our future, not dressing for others' approval. But I couldn't explain that to my daughter, who was discovering for the first time that the world judges you first by appearances, then by background, and only much later by character. The changes accelerated in high school. Gabby joined clubs I didn't understand, made friends whose parents I never met, and started speaking Spanish less and less. She was embarrassed by my accent, by the food I cooked, by the novellas I watched in the evening. She became Gabby instead of Gabriela, straightened her naturally curly hair, and wore clothes that made her look like everyone else. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I told myself it was normal teenage rebellion, that she would grow out of it, come back to me, that all the books said this was just a phase. But then came the school events, the parent-teacher conferences where she would translate selectively, omitting the teacher's praises. The band concerts where she introduced me vaguely as Elena to her friends' parents. The awards ceremony where she asked me not to come because I had been working all day and probably wouldn't be dressed appropriately. Each slight was a small cut, barely noticeable on its own. Together, they formed a wound that never quite healed. By the time Gabby was accepted to Northwestern University with a partial scholarship, I was both immensely proud and increasingly invisible in her life. She had crafted a personal narrative that conveniently minimized her background, her culture, and especially her mother's occupation. What she didn't know, what I had never felt the need to broadcast, was that Morales Cleaning Services had become one of the most successful commercial cleaning companies in Chicago. We had contracts with major corporations, employed over 70 people, and had expanded into specialized cleaning for medical facilities. I had earned my GED and then taken night classes in business management at the community college. I spoke at entrepreneurship events for immigrant women and mentored new business owners through a city program. And I had been quietly investing in real estate throughout the city, starting with rundown properties that I renovated with the help of reliable contractors I met through my business. One such property was a 6-unit apartment building near Northwestern's campus that I had purchased 2 years before Gabby started college. When she was accepted, I offered her an apartment in my building. She was thrilled. The location was perfect. The rent was manageable with her part-time job and my help, and the units had been beautifully renovated. What I didn't explicitly mention was that I owned the building. The property management company handled all interactions with tenants, and the ownership was under my business name, not my personal one. It wasn't that I was hiding it from her. It just never seemed relevant to mention, and Gabby never asked. She was too busy reinventing herself as Gabby Morales, pre-law student from Chicago, not Gabriela Morales, daughter of an immigrant cleaning lady. Which brings me back to that September afternoon, standing on the sidewalk outside my own building, being dismissed by my daughter as if I were a stranger. I drove home in silence, the familiar streets of Chicago blurring through my tears. The weight of all those years, the sacrifices, the long nights, the physical toll of cleaning when I first arrived, the missed school plays when I couldn't get time off, the constant push to provide Gabby with opportunities I never had, pressed down on me until I could barely breathe. My house was empty when I arrived. Not the tiny apartment or the foreclosed fixer-upper, but the beautiful 3-bedroom home in a good neighborhood that I had purchased 5 years ago. It had a proper office for running my business, a kitchen where I could cook traditional Colombian meals when I had the time, and a small garden in the back where I grew herbs and vegetables like my mother had in Bogotá. I sat at my kitchen table, still in my coat, and called the one person who would understand. "Rosa, it's me. Can you talk?" My voice broke on the last word. Rosa Santos had been my friend since those early days in Pilsen. We had met at English classes, 2 young Latinas trying to navigate a new country. While I had built my cleaning business, she had opened a small Colombian bakery that had grown into a beloved neighborhood institution. We had supported each other through countless challenges, celebrated each small victory, and remained connected even as our lives diverged in success. "Elena? What happened?" Rosa's warm voice was instantly concerned. I told her about the encounter with Gabby, the dismissal, the way my own daughter had looked through me as if I were invisible. "After everything, Rosa, after every sacrifice, she's ashamed of me, of where she comes from." I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. What did I do wrong? Rosa was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that would stay with me for months to come. You did nothing wrong, amiga. You gave her wings. It's not your fault she's flying in the wrong direction. We talked for nearly an hour. Rosa reminded me of all we had survived, of how strong I had become. She asked me pointed questions about how long I would continue to accept this treatment, to finance this life where I was a footnote rather than a chapter. You own the building she lives in, Elena, Rosa said finally. You employ more people than her boyfriend's father probably does at his law firm. When are you going to stop hiding your light so your daughter can shine? I didn't have an answer. I had spent so long focused on giving Gabby every advantage that I had never considered whether I was doing her a disservice by allowing her to deny her own history and her mother. After we hung up, I walked through my house, really seeing it for the first time in months. The framed article about Morales Cleaning Services winning a Chamber of Commerce award. The photo of me with the mayor at a small business recognition event. The investment portfolio statements neatly filed in my office, showing properties across 3 Chicago neighborhoods. I had built something remarkable from nothing. Yet I had allowed my own daughter to treat me as if I were still nothing. That night, I made a decision. I would no longer shrink myself to protect Gabby's carefully constructed facade. It was time for her to see me, truly see me, for who I had become. Not just her embarrassing immigrant mother who cleaned houses, but a woman who had built an empire from dust and determination. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. The next morning, my property manager called to report a major plumbing issue in the building where Gabby lived. The main line had backed up, affecting 3 units, including my daughter's. Normally, I would have let the management company handle it, but something Rosa said had struck a chord. I'll take care of it personally, I told the manager. Send the emergency plumber, but let the tenants know the owner will be on site this afternoon. I wore my good clothes that day. Not cleaning clothes or casual weekend wear, but the outfit I reserved for business meetings with potential corporate clients. A tailored navy suit, subtle gold jewelry, and the leather portfolio embossed with my company logo that held all my business documents. I styled my hair carefully and applied minimal makeup. Professional, polished, purposeful. By the time I arrived at the building, the plumber had already begun work. Several tenants were gathered in the lobby, including Gabby and 2 of her friends, the blonde girl from yesterday and a tall young man with an expensive watch. Madison and Tyler, I would learn later. Gabby's eyes widened when she saw me walk through the door. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she asked, clearly confused. She glanced nervously at her friends who were watching our interaction with interest. I smiled, calm and confident in a way I had learned through years of business negotiations. "Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elena Morales, the owner of this building. I understand there's been a plumbing issue affecting several units." The silence that followed was deafening. Gabby's mouth literally dropped open. Her friends exchanged glances, then looked back at me with new interest. You own this building?" the young man, Tyler, asked, his tone skeptical. I opened my portfolio and pulled out the property documents. "Yes, through my company, EM Properties. It's one of several investments in my real estate portfolio." I turned to address all the gathered tenants. "I want to assure you that the plumbing issue will be resolved today, and any affected apartments will receive compensation for the inconvenience, as outlined in your lease agreements." I spoke clearly, my accent present, but my authority unmistakable. The tenants nodded, some looking relieved, others impressed. Only Gabby remained frozen, her face a complex mask of emotions I couldn't fully decipher. "If you have any questions, my property manager has my direct contact information," I continued. "Now, I'd like to speak with the plumber about the repairs." As I walked toward the maintenance area, I heard Madison whisper not so quietly to Gabby. "Your mom owns this place? I thought you said she worked in cleaning services?" I didn't hear Gabby's response. I didn't need to. The seed had been planted. The revelation had begun. For the first time in years, I walked with my full height, my shoulders straight, my head high. Not as Gabby's invisible mother, but as Elena Morales, a woman who had built something substantial in a country that had not always welcomed her. The plumbing issue was resolved within hours. Before I left, I stopped by Gabby's apartment to check that everything was working properly. She opened the door hesitantly, her expression guarded. "May I come in?" I asked formally, still maintaining the professional demeanor I had displayed, in the lobby. She stepped aside silently. The apartment was beautiful. I had personally overseen its renovation 2 years ago, choosing the hardwood floors, the granite countertops, the modern light fixtures. Gabby had added her own touches, photographs of friends, none of me, textbooks stacked neatly, a Northwestern pennant on the wall. "Your friends seem nice," I said, standing in the middle of the living room, not sitting down, not making myself small as I usually did in spaces Gabby claimed as her own. "Mom," she started, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. "I don't understand. You never told me you owned this building." "You never asked," I replied simply. "You never ask about my work, Gabby. You never have shown interest in what I've built while you were growing up. You've been too busy pretending I'm someone to be ashamed of." Her cheeks flushed. "That's not fair." "No. Then why am I Elena?" "To your friends? Why do you tense up when I bring you food from our culture? Why have you never once invited me to meet your boyfriend's parents, even though you've been dating for nearly a year?" The questions hung in the air between us, years of unspoken hurt finally finding voice. Gabby looked away, her eyes filling with tears. "It's complicated," she whispered. "No," I said firmly. "It's actually very simple. You're either proud of where you come from, of who I am and what I've done to give you this life, or you're not. And if you're not, then perhaps it's time you stand on your own 2 feet without my support." Her head snapped up. "What does that mean?" I gestured around the apartment. "This? The tuition supplements? The credit card for emergencies that somehow includes designer coffee and weekend brunches? These are things I provide because I love you and because I can afford to. Because my embarrassing cleaning business has become a multi-million-dollar company with corporate contracts across Chicago. Because the mother you're ashamed to introduce properly has been featured in business magazines and speaks at entrepreneurship conferences." Gabby sank onto the couch, looking suddenly young and lost. "I didn't know," she said softly. "You didn't want to know," I corrected her. "It was easier to keep me in the box you created, the struggling immigrant, the simple cleaning lady. It fit the narrative you wanted to present to your new friends." I moved toward the door, then paused with my hand on the knob. "I have a dinner meeting with potential investors tomorrow night at La Scarola. I'd like you to join me. Bring your boyfriend if you want. It's time you saw the reality of who your mother is, not the convenient fiction you've created." Without waiting for her response, I left, closing the door quietly behind me. As I walked down the hallway of my own building, past apartments filled with students who had no idea of the journey that had led me here, I felt something shift inside me. For 20 years, I had carried the weight of Gabby's expectations, her embarrassment, her demands. I had made myself smaller to let her grow larger. But in that moment, standing tall in my success, I realized that I had done neither of us any favors by hiding in the shadows of my daughter's reinvention. It was time for both of us to step into the light. I spent that evening in my home office, reviewing contracts and property documents, but my mind kept drifting back to Gabby's face when I revealed I owned her building. The shock, the confusion, and something else, perhaps a recognition that there was more to her mother than she had allowed herself to see. I wondered if she would show up at the dinner tomorrow. Part of me feared she wouldn't. that this confrontation would push her even further away. Another part, the part that had stood tall in that lobby, almost hoped she'd stay away if she couldn't accept me as I truly was. My cell phone rang just after 10. It was Luis, my business partner of the last 8 years. We had met when his janitorial supply company became our vendor, and eventually joined forces to expand Morales cleaning services into commercial and medical facilities. He was the operational genius behind our growth, while I managed client relationships and business development. "Elena, are you still reviewing the Northwestern Memorial proposal? It's late, and you know how you get when you don't sleep enough. Before big meetings." I smiled despite my troubled thoughts. Luis knew me too well. "I'm almost finished," I lied, looking at the barely touched document on my screen. "Just making sure everything is perfect." "Everything is already perfect," he said confidently. "We've prepared for months. The proposal is solid, the numbers work, and they'd be fools not to hire us." His certainty was one of the things I valued most about our partnership. Where I sometimes doubted, questioning whether a company would take a chance on a business founded by an immigrant woman with no formal education, Luis never hesitated. He saw our worth clearly and expected others to do the same. "Something else is bothering you," he said after my too long pause. "Gabby?" I sighed and swiveled away from my computer. "I showed up at her building today. There was a plumbing issue, and now she knows I own it." I recounted the afternoon's events, the revelation, the confrontation in her apartment afterward. Luis was quiet for a moment. Then he chuckled. "About time, Elena. That girl has been living in a fantasy world for too long." His directness was refreshing. Most people in my life, even Rosa, tiptoed around the subject of Gabby, careful not to criticize her too harshly, knowing how much her rejection hurt me. But Luis had watched from the sidelines as my daughter gradually erased me from her public life, and his patience had worn thin years ago. "I invited her to the investor dinner tomorrow," I said. "Bold move. Think she'll come? I don't know." I traced the wood grain of my desk with my fingertip. "I told her to bring Jason if she wants." Luis made a dismissive sound. He had met Jason once when the boy had reluctantly accompanied Gabby to a holiday party at our office. Jason had spent the entire evening on his phone, barely acknowledging the employees who approached him, treating the event like an obligation to be endured rather than a celebration to be enjoyed. "Well, if she comes, she'll see exactly who her mother is in that room," Luis said. "And if she doesn't, that tells you something too." After we hung up, I closed my laptop without finishing the review. Luis was right. The proposal was solid, and I needed rest more than I needed another revision. I went through my nighttime routine mechanically, washing my face, applying the expensive moisturizer that was one of my few indulgences, and changing into the soft cotton pajamas I preferred, over silk or satin. As I turned off the lights, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Gabby. "What time tomorrow? And what should I wear?" Just that. No acknowledgement of our confrontation, no indication of how she felt about the revelation. But she was coming. It was a start. I texted back, 7:30 p.m., business formal. I'll send a car for you at 7. Her response came quickly. "I can drive myself." Even now, setting boundaries, establishing independence. I typed, "The investors are sending a car for me. It can pick you up on the way." After a long pause, "Okay, Jason says he'll come too." I didn't respond, just set my phone on the nightstand and turned over in bed. Tomorrow would be a significant day, both professionally and personally. The Northwestern Memorial contract would be our largest yet if we secured it. A multi-year, multi-million-dollar deal that would firmly establish Morales Cleaning Services as one of the premier commercial cleaning companies in the Midwest. And the dinner would be Gabby's first real glimpse into the business world I had built while she was busy reinventing herself at college. Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of empty rooms I needed to clean but couldn't find the supplies for, while important people in business suits watched and checked their watches impatiently. Morning brought clarity. I woke before my alarm, made a strong cup of Colombian coffee, and sat in my small garden as the sun rose. The herbs my mother had taught me to grow, cilantro, oregano, mint, brushed against my legs in the gentle breeze. In moments like this, the distance between Bogotá and Chicago seemed to collapse. I could almost hear my mother's voice. Elenita, never forget where you come from. It's the soil that grows your strength. I had tried to pass that wisdom to Gabby. In her early years, I had spoken to her only in Spanish, told her stories of Colombia, cooked the foods of my childhood. I had shown her photos of her grandparents whom she had never met, explaining that they loved her from afar, even if they couldn't accept the circumstances of her birth. I had taught her to be proud of her heritage, to draw power from it. Somewhere, along the way, that pride had transformed into shame. The Spanish language became something to be hidden, spoken only at home, then not at all. The Colombian dishes I prepared were rejected in favor of American fast food. The stories of my childhood were met with eye rolls and exasperated sighs. "Mom, nobody cares about some village in Colombia," she had told me once, around 14. "This is America. We live in Chicago. I was born here. I'm American." "You are American," I had agreed. "But you are also Colombian. Both can be true, mi vida." But Gabby didn't want both. She wanted only the identity that made her journey easier, that allowed her to blend seamlessly with her wealthier classmates, that didn't require explanations or invite uncomfortable questions. I didn't blame her for wanting an easier path. I had worked my entire adult life to ensure she had opportunities I never did. But somewhere in that process, she had come to see me, my accent, my work, my immigrant status, as obstacles to her assimilation rather than the very foundations that had made her opportunities possible. The day passed in a blur of meetings and calls. I visited 2 of our client sites, speaking with both the management and our cleaning staff, making sure operations were running smoothly. I touched base with our HR director about a new training program for employees, approved the quarterly budget Luis had prepared, and finalized the presentation for the evening. At 5 o'clock, I went home to prepare for the dinner. I chose my outfit carefully, a deep burgundy suit that I had splurged on for special occasions, paired with a cream silk blouse and the gold necklace that had been my grandmother's. Simple, elegant, unmistakably professional. I arranged my hair in a sleek chignon and applied makeup that enhanced without overpowering. The car arrived precisely at 6:45, a black town car sent by the investment group we were meeting. The driver, an older man named Cal, greeted me warmly as he held the door. "Good evening, Ms. Morales. You're looking very nice tonight." "Thank you, Cal. We need to make a stop on the way to pick up my daughter and her boyfriend." He nodded and pulled smoothly away from the curb. As we drove toward Northwestern, I reviewed my notes one last time, focusing on the key points. I wanted to emphasize to the investors. Morales Cleaning Services had grown from a one-woman operation to a company employing over 70 people, with annual revenues exceeding $4 million. The Northwestern Memorial contract would push us well beyond the $5 million mark and open doors to other major healthcare facilities across the region. The car stopped in front of Gabby's building, my building, at exactly 7 Fear. Cal started to get out to open the door, but I stopped him. "I'll get them. Back in a moment." I walked into the lobby, remembering yesterday's scene. Today it was quiet, just a couple of students passing through on their way out. I texted Gabby that I was waiting downstairs. 3 minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and my breath caught in my throat. Gabby looked stunning in a simple black dress, her hair styled in loose waves that framed her face. Beside her stood Jason, tall and conventionally handsome in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. They made a striking couple, young, attractive, poised. But it was the expression on Gabby's face that held my attention. Gone was the embarrassment from yesterday, replaced by something I couldn't quite identify. Caution, perhaps. Curiosity. A wariness that suggested she was stepping into unknown territory. "You look beautiful, mija," I said, using the endearment I had gradually stopped voicing as she pulled away from me. "Thanks, Mom," she replied, her voice neutral but not cold. "You look really nice, too." Jason extended his hand formally. "Ms. Morales, thank you for including me this evening." I shook his hand, noting the firm grip, the direct eye contact. He'd been coached well in business etiquette. "Thank you for joining us, Jason. The car is waiting." The drive to the restaurant was mostly silent. I made a few attempts at conversation, asking about their classes, mentioning the unseasonably warm weather, but received only brief responses. Gabby kept glancing at me, then away, as if seeing me with new eyes but not yet sure what to make of what she saw. La Scarola was one of Chicago's finest Italian restaurants, a place where business deals were made over perfectly prepared osso buco and bottles of Barolo. As we entered, the maitre d' greeted me by name. "Ms. Morales, wonderful to see you again. Your party is already seated in the private room. May I take your coat?" I handed him my coat, noting the surprise that flashed across both Gabby's and Jason's faces at the familiar greeting. This was clearly not the reception they had expected for a cleaning lady. We were led through the main dining room to a wood-paneled, private space at the back. 5 people were already seated around a large round table, 3 men and 2 women, all in business attire, all exuding the quiet confidence of people accustomed to wealth and power. As we entered, they all stood. The oldest of the group, a distinguished man with silver hair, stepped forward with a warm smile. "Elena, right on time as always," he said, taking my hand in both of his. "And you've brought guests." "Robert, thank you for arranging this evening," I replied with equal warmth. "Allow me to introduce my daughter, Gabriela Morales, and her boyfriend, Jason Williams." "Gabby, Jason, this is Robert Chen, managing partner at Lakefront Ventures." Robert shook hands with both of them. "A pleasure to meet Elena's daughter at last. She speaks of you often, and with great pride." I proceeded to introduce the rest of the group, Jennifer and Michael from the investment firm, and Dr. Torres and Dr. Patel from Northwestern Memorial Hospital's administration. Each greeted Gabby and Jason warmly, several commenting on family, resemblances, or expressing pleasure at finally meeting my daughter. As we took our seats, I watched Gabby from the corner of my eye. She looked slightly dazed, struggling to reconcile this environment, where her mother was clearly respected and at ease, with the image she had cultivated of me in her mind. Jason seemed equally off balance, his usual confidence wavering as he realized he was not, as perhaps expected, the most important person at the table. "Before we dive into business," Robert said once we were all settled, "I'd like to propose a toast to Elena, who has built one of the most impressive growth stories I've seen in Chicago's service sector." Glasses were raised around the table. "To Elena," Jennifer added, "whose company has not only created jobs and wealth, but has done so while maintaining the highest standards of employee treatment and environmental responsibility in the industry." I accepted the toast with a modest nod, but inside I was cataloging every micro-expression on Gabby's face. Surprise, confusion, a dawning realization. The conversation flowed easily after that. We discussed the Northwestern Memorial proposal, with Dr. Torres expressing particular interest in our specialized training for medical facility cleaning. I outlined our expansion plans, our quality control measures, our employee retention rate that far exceeded industry standards. Throughout it all, Gabby remained mostly silent, listening intently. Jason attempted to join the conversation several times, often with comments that revealed his privileged background and limited understanding of the business world beyond theoretical knowledge. My father always says that immigrant-founded businesses have an advantage because they're willing to work for less profit, he said at one point, clearly thinking he was paying me a compliment. The table fell momentarily silent. Then Dr. Patel, herself an immigrant from India, responded coolly. In my experience, immigrant-founded businesses succeed because of innovation and quality, not by undervaluing their worth. Jason flushed, realizing his misstep. Gabby looked mortified. I smoothly redirected the conversation. Speaking of quality, Dr. Torres, I'd love to hear more about your specific concerns regarding the oncology ward cleaning protocols. The dinner proceeded, courses coming and going as we discussed business strategy, market conditions, and growth potential. By the time dessert arrived, a delicate panna cotta with fresh berries, we had reached an agreement in principle. Lakefront Ventures would provide the capital needed for our expansion, and Northwestern Memorial would sign the 3-year contract, with specific terms to be finalized in the coming week. As coffee was served, Robert turned to Gabby with a kind smile. Gabriella, your mother tells me you're studying pre-law. Any interest in business law? We're always looking for sharp young minds who understand both legal and entrepreneurial perspectives. Gabby seemed startled to be directly addressed. I haven't decided on a specialty yet, but yes, business law is definitely of interest. Your mother's journey would make an excellent case study, Jennifer added. Building a multi-million-dollar enterprise without outside investment until now, maintaining complete ownership, diversifying into real estate. It's remarkable. You must be incredibly proud. Gabby's eyes met mine across the table. In that moment, I saw something shift in her expression. A recognition, perhaps, that she had been viewing me through a lens that distorted rather than clarified. Yes, she said softly. I am proud. The rest of the evening wrapped up with handshakes, promises of follow-up meetings, and warm congratulations. As we walked out of the restaurant, Robert fell into step beside me. Your daughter seems lovely, Elena. A bit surprised by all this, I think. I smiled ruefully. We've had some communication issues lately. This was her first real glimpse into my professional world. Robert nodded understandingly. My daughter went through a phase where she pretended I was a teacher, not a boring businessman. Kids sometimes need to create distance before they can appreciate connection. He patted my shoulder. She'll come around. Tonight was a good start. The car ride home was initially silent. Jason was the first to speak. Ms. Morales, that was. Impressive. I had no idea your company was so significant. His tone suggested he was recalibrating his entire perception of me. Thank you, Jason. We've worked hard to build it to where it is today. Gabby remained quiet, looking out the window at the passing city lights. When we reached her building, I instructed Cal to wait while I walked them to the door. In the lobby, Jason excused himself tactfully. I'll head upstairs and give you some privacy. Thank you again for including me tonight, Ms. Morales. Once he was gone, Gabby finally met my eyes. Why didn't you ever tell me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. About the business? And it seemed like the only way was to become someone else. The familiar ache returned to my chest, but now it was mingled with understanding. Hadn't I done something similar? Hadn't I carefully cultivated a certain image in business circles? Downplaying my humble beginnings, focusing on my success rather than my struggles? I understand wanting to belong, Gabby, I said gently, but pretending to be someone you're not, erasing your history, your culture, your family, that doesn't lead to belonging. It leads to isolation. She nodded, wiping away a tear. I'm starting to see that. Last night at dinner, I realized I've been missing out on really knowing my own mother. All these people know more about your accomplishments than I do. They see you more clearly than I have in years. I reached across the space between us and took her hand. It's not too late, mija. We can start again. She squeezed my hand, then reached into her backpack and pulled out a folder. I want to know everything, Mom. I found these articles about you online this morning. You were featured in Hispanic Business Magazine. You won the Minority Business Leader Award last year. Why didn't you tell me? I tried, I said simply. But you stopped listening. She looked down, acknowledging the truth of it. I want to listen now. I want to really know you. Not just as my mom, but as Elena Morales, businesswoman, property owner, immigrant success story. She hesitated, then added, if you'll give me another chance. I felt my own eyes fill with tears. For years, I had carried two separate lives. The one Gabby saw, where I was just her mother who happened to clean buildings, and the one the rest of the world saw, where I was a respected entrepreneur. The possibility of merging those worlds, of being fully seen by my daughter, filled me with both hope and fear. I would like that, I said finally. But Gabby, it has to be real. I can't go back to being your secret, to being introduced as Elena to your friends. I know, she said quickly. I'm going to do better, starting now. She hesitated, then continued. Actually, I was hoping. There's this cultural heritage event at Northwestern next weekend. Students sharing their family stories, their traditions. I signed up to talk about Colombia, about you. If you'd come, maybe bring some of Abuela's recipes for the tasting portion. I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat. This invitation, to step publicly into her world, to be acknowledged as her mother, her heritage, was more meaningful than any business deal I had ever closed. I nodded, not trusting my voice. And maybe, she added tentatively, I could start coming to the office sometimes, learning about the business. If I'm considering business law, it would be good experience, right? I smiled through my tears. We could arrange an internship for next summer. Paid, of course. No special treatment. She laughed, the sound breaking the last of the tension between us. I wouldn't expect any. From what I saw last night, you run a tight ship. I learned from the best, I said, thinking of my own mother, who had managed our household in Colombia with remarkable efficiency despite limited resources. My mother always said, excellence doesn't depend on wealth, it depends on attention. Tell me more about her, Gabby said, leaning forward eagerly. About Colombia, about your childhood. I want to know it all. And so, as the afternoon light filtered through my office windows and Carmen quietly rescheduled my remaining appointments, I began to tell my daughter the stories I had tried to share for years. About the mountains around Bogotá. About my mother's garden, which I had replicated in my backyard. About my journey to America, pregnant and alone, determined to create a life where my child would never know hunger or fear. This time, Gabby listened, really listened. And in her attentive silence, I found something I had been missing for far too long. The sense that my daughter finally saw me, truly saw me, for who I was. Not just the cleaning lady, not just the successful businesswoman, but Elena Morales, in all my complexity, with all my contradictions, my failures and triumphs, my sacrifices and achievements. As I spoke, I realized that this was perhaps the greatest success of all. Not the buildings I owned or the business I had built, but this moment of authentic connection with my daughter, who was finally ready to claim her history instead of hiding from it. I'm sorry it took seeing your name on my lease to really see you, Mom, Gabby said when I finally fell silent. But I'm so glad I know the truth now. I reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture from her childhood. La verdad siempre sale a la luz, I said softly. The truth always comes to light. She smiled, recognizing the proverb. My mother had often repeated. Abuela was right. She usually was, I agreed. And she would be very proud of you, Gabriela. Not just for your achievements, but for your courage in facing uncomfortable truths. That takes a different kind of strength. Gabby's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, then back at me uncertainly. "Do you need to go?" I asked. "It's just Jason. He wants to know how our talk went." She hesitated. "Actually, he invited us both to dinner with his parents next weekend. He said his dad is really interested in meeting you after hearing about last night." I raised an eyebrow. "And how do you feel about that?" She took a deep breath. "Honestly, I'm excited. I want them to meet my mom, the real you, not the version I would have presented a week ago." She looked down briefly, then back up with determination in her eyes. "I'm done hiding who we are, where we come from. It's like you said, pretending doesn't lead to belonging." I felt a surge of pride so intense it nearly took my breath away. This growth, this self-awareness, was worth more than any material success I could have given her. "Then we'll go to dinner," I said. "But first, we have a cultural heritage event to prepare for. My mother's empanadas recipe is complicated. You'll need practice." Gabby's smile lit up her entire face. "Can we start this weekend? I could come over Saturday." "Of course. I'll teach you exactly how my mother taught me." I stood and moved around the coffee table to sit beside her on the couch. "It begins with the dough. The secret is in how you mix it. Not too much, not too little. Just like relationships." As she leaned against me, listening intently, I realized that sometimes the most valuable things we build aren't businesses or properties. They're bridges, connections across the chasms that life and our own choices create between us and those we love most. The truth had indeed come to light. And in its illumination, both my daughter and I could finally see each other clearly, without shame or pretense. It had taken my name on a lease to begin the process, but what would sustain us moving forward was something far more powerful: mutual respect, honest communication, and the shared acknowledgement of where we had come from and who we had become. For the first time in years, I felt whole, not split between the mother Gabby knew and the businesswoman the world saw, but fully, completely Elena Morales. Immigrant, entrepreneur, property owner, and most importantly, mother to a daughter, who was finally ready to claim her heritage with pride. The cultural heritage event at Northwestern University was scheduled for the following Saturday. As promised, Gabby came to my house early that weekend to learn how to make my mother's empanadas. The kitchen filled with the aromas of my childhood: cumin, onions, and cilantro sizzling in olive oil, the rich scent of seasoned ground beef and potatoes, the distinctive smell of corn flour as we mixed the dough. "The key is in how you fold them," I explained, demonstrating the technique my mother had taught me. "Pinch the edges, then twist. Like this. Too loose, and they'll burst open while frying. Too tight, and the filling won't cook properly." Gabby watched intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her first attempt was clumsy, the edges uneven, the filling spilling out. "Mine looks terrible," she said with a frustrated laugh. "You should have seen my first attempts." My mother would sigh and say, "Elenita, you have 10 thumbs today." I gently took the misshapen empanada from her hands and reshaped it. "Try again. This time, feel the dough with your fingertips. It will tell you how much pressure to use." She looked skeptical, but tried again. This time, the edges sealed. More neatly, the half-moon shape more defined. "Better," I said approvingly. "Your grandmother would say you're down to only 5 thumbs now." Gabby smiled, glancing around my kitchen with new eyes. "I never realized how much this place reminds me of the stories you used to tell about your home in Colombia. The herbs growing in the window, the wooden spoons hanging on the wall. I wanted to bring a piece of my mother's kitchen with me," I said, moving to the stove to check the oil temperature. "When you're far from home, you recreate what you can." We worked side by side for hours, Gabby asking questions about Colombia, about her grandmother, about my early years in Chicago. For the first time in too long, she wasn't just enduring my stories. She was seeking them out, connecting her own identity to the history I shared. "Do you think," she asked as we packaged the cooled empanadas, "we could visit Colombia someday? I'd like to see where you grew up, meet my grandparents if they're willing." The question caught me off guard. "They're getting older now," I said carefully, "and they've never quite reconciled with my choices. But yes, I think that would be possible. I'd like that very much." She nodded, a determined look crossing her face. "I want to speak better Spanish too. I've let it slip too much. Maybe we could speak more at home? And you could correct me when I make mistakes?" Each request felt like a small miracle, a rebuilding of bridges I had thought permanently burned. "Of course, mija. Whenever you're ready." The cultural heritage event itself was held in Northwestern Student Center, a grand space transformed by displays representing dozens of countries and cultures. Students and their families milled about, sampling foods, examining artifacts, listening to presentations. Gabby had reserved a small table for her Colombian display, which we had prepared together. Photos of Bogotá, traditional woven bags, a small collection of emeralds, Colombia's famous export, and of course, our empanadas. What I hadn't expected was the poster Gabby had created, titled "The Journey from Bogotá to Chicago, My Mother's Story." It featured photos of me throughout the years, holding baby Gabby in my tiny first apartment, standing proudly in front of my first house, cutting the ribbon at the opening of Morales Cleaning Services office, receiving my business award last year. The timeline traced not just my physical journey from Colombia to Chicago, but my professional journey from house cleaner to business owner. "Gabby," I whispered, emotion catching in my throat. "This is long overdue," she said firmly. I should have been proud of this story all along. Before I could respond, a small crowd began gathering around our table. Among them, I recognized Madison and Tyler from that day outside Gabby's apartment, along with several other young people I assumed were her classmates. "Welcome to our Colombian heritage display," Gabby said, her voice clear and confident. "I'm Gabriela Morales, and this is my mother, Elena Morales. She immigrated to Chicago from Bogotá 25 years ago and built an incredible life here. I'll be sharing her story, our story, and offering a taste of traditional Colombian empanadas that we made together using my grandmother's recipe." Madison's eyes widened slightly as she looked between me and the poster, recognition dawning. "You're the owner of Gabby's building," she said. "And a business owner?" I nodded, but it was Gabby who answered. "My mother founded Morales Cleaning Services, which now employs over 70 people and has contracts with major corporations and medical facilities across Chicago," she said, a hint of pride in her voice that warmed me from within. "She's also invested in real estate throughout the city. The building where Tyler, you, and I live is just one of her properties." The looks on her friends' faces shifted from surprise to impressed curiosity. Tyler, who had been dismissive during our dinner with the investors, now regarded me with newfound respect. "That's seriously amazing," he said. "My dad always talks about the challenges of scaling service businesses. How did you manage growth and quality control simultaneously?" The genuine interest in his question suggested that perhaps Jason had spoken to him after our dinner. I began to answer, explaining our tiered management structure and proprietary training programs, when another student interrupted. "Wait, so you're not just a cleaning lady?" Gabby always said her mom worked in cleaning services, I thought. "You thought what many people assume," I said calmly, "that immigrant women who clean are somehow less than professionals in other fields, that our work is simple, unimportant, or temporary." The student flushed, embarrassed. "I didn't mean—" "It's a common misconception," I continued, keeping my tone gentle. but cleaning. Doing it well, doing it efficiently, doing it safely, especially in medical facilities where lives depend on proper sanitation, is skilled, essential work. I began as a house cleaner, yes. I'm proud of that work. It allowed me to feed my daughter, to save for our future. And the knowledge I gained scrubbing floors and sanitizing surfaces became the foundation of a multi-million-dollar business. Gabby watched me speak, and I saw something new in her expression, not just acceptance or respect, but genuine admiration. She stepped closer to me, subtly linking her arm with mine as I continued. Every profession has dignity if approached with pride and excellence, I said. That's something my mother taught me in Colombia, and what I've tried to teach Gabriela. And I finally started listening, Gabby added with a self-deprecating smile. Better late than never, right? Her friends laughed, breaking the tension. Then Madison reached for an empanada, taking a bite and closing her eyes in appreciation. Oh my God, these are amazing, she declared. Gabby, you made these? With my mom, Gabby clarified, squeezing my arm gently. They're my grandmother's recipe, passed down through generations. Just one small part of the heritage I'm finally embracing properly. For the next hour, students and faculty members stopped by our table. Gabby led the presentation, telling my story, our story, with a fluency that suggested she had practiced extensively. She spoke of Colombia's beauty and challenges, of my journey as a pregnant immigrant, of the building of my business and investment portfolio. With each telling, she seemed to stand taller, her voice growing more confident. I contributed occasionally, answering specific questions, but mostly I watched my daughter with growing pride. This was healing in action, Gabby reclaiming her heritage, publicly acknowledging her roots, integrating her past with her present. When the event wound down, we packed up the few remaining empanadas and the display materials. As we walked toward the parking lot, Gabby's phone buzzed with a text message. It's Jason, she said after checking it. He wants to know if we're still on for dinner with his parents tonight. I had almost forgotten about the dinner commitment. After the emotional intensity of the heritage event, the prospect of meeting Jason's undoubtedly privileged parents felt exhausting. Gabby must have read my expression. We can cancel if you're tired, Mom. They'll understand. I was tempted to accept the out she offered, but something held me back. Perhaps it was the memory of all the times Gabby had hidden me from her social circle, kept me separate from the life she was building. This invitation, to meet her boyfriend's parents, to be introduced properly as her mother, represented another step in our reconciliation. No, let's go, I decided. Just give me time to freshen up first. Jason had made reservations at Gibson's, one of Chicago's premier steakhouses. Normally, I would have changed into something more formal, but I decided to wear what I had on. Beautifully embroidered blouse from Colombia paired with tailored black pants. It was elegant enough for the restaurant, but unmistakably reflected my heritage. If I was going to meet these people, I would do so authentically. We arrived a few minutes early, but Jason and his parents were already seated. As we approached the table, they stood, a tall, distinguished-looking man with graying temples, and a slender woman whose expertly styled blonde hair and subtle but expensive jewelry screamed old money. Mom, this is Jason's father, Richard. Williams and his mother, Pamela, Gabby said, her voice steady. Mr. and Mrs. Williams, this is my mother, Elena Morales. Richard extended his hand with a practiced smile. A pleasure to meet you, Elena. Jason has told us a lot about you after that dinner the other night. Very impressive background. Pamela's greeting was more reserved, her handshake delicate and brief. Yes, quite a surprise to hear about your business ventures. Jason mentioned something about a cleaning company. Her tone carried a subtle note of condescension that I had encountered many times over the years. The implication that a cleaning company was somehow quaint or modest, regardless of its scale or success. I smiled pleasantly as we took our seats. Morales Cleaning Services specializes in commercial and medical facility sanitation. We're actually finalizing a contract with Northwestern Memorial this week. Medical cleaning? Isn't that rather specialized? Pamela asked, her perfectly shaped eyebrows rising slightly. Very, I agreed. The protocols for operating rooms and oncology wards are particularly complex. Improper sanitation can literally cost lives. Richard seemed genuinely interested. And you built this business from scratch? Jason mentioned you started with residential cleaning? I nodded, noting how Gabby was watching this exchange with alert eyes, her posture tense. I came to Chicago with very little. Cleaning homes was honest work that required no formal credentials, just thoroughness and reliability. Admirable, Richard said, though whether he meant the work itself or the fact that I had advanced beyond it remained unclear. Self-made success stories are becoming rarer these days. Too many young people expect things to be handed to them. Jason shifted, uncomfortably in his seat. Gabby's eyes narrowed slightly. I wouldn't say that, I responded carefully. Young people today face different challenges than my generation did. Housing costs alone have outpaced wages dramatically. Gabby works harder than I did at her age, balancing studies, part-time work, and extracurriculars. Speaking of which, Gabby interjected, Mom and I just came from the Cultural Heritage event at Northwestern. We presented on Colombian traditions and history. It was really wonderful. Pamela brightened slightly. Colombia? How interesting. We visited Cartagena on a cruise last year. Beautiful colonial architecture, though we mostly stayed in the tourist areas. The guide advised against venturing too far out. Safety concerns, you understand. I bit back the response that immediately came to mind about the complex realities of Colombia beyond tourist perceptions. Instead, I said, Cartagena is beautiful, though quite different from Bogotá, where I grew up. The mountain setting creates a completely different culture and atmosphere. The conversation continued in this vein throughout the appetizers, seemingly polite exchanges underscored by subtle class and cultural tensions. Richard asked about my business model and seemed genuinely impressed by some of my answers. Pamela spoke of their extensive travels while peppering me with questions that bordered on interrogative. Jason remained mostly quiet, watching the dynamics unfold with an anxious expression. Gabby, however, surprised me. With each subtly condescending remark from Pamela, each assumption from Richard, she countered with stories highlighting my accomplishments, my values, my journey. She wasn't defensive or confrontational, simply matter-of-fact in repositioning the narrative when it veered toward stereotype or diminishment. Did you know, she said after Pamela made a comment about how colorful Latin culture was, that my mother serves on the board of the Chicago Hispanic Business Association? They're working to create pathways for more Latino students to enter business and entrepreneurship programs at top universities. I hadn't told Gabby about my board position. It was relatively recent, and during the period when she had shown little interest in my professional life. The fact that she knew, that she had researched me, filled me with quiet joy. When our main courses arrived, Richard steered the conversation toward Jason and Gabby's future plans. So, Gabriella, Jason tells us you're considering business law? That's an excellent choice. My firm is always looking for sharp young associates. He cut into his steak with precision. Though I must say, with your background, you might also consider immigration law. There would be a certain authenticity there. The suggestion, though ostensibly complimentary, carried the clear implication that my daughter might be better suited to serving her community rather than entering the prestigious world of corporate law. Before I could respond, Gabby spoke up. Actually, Mr. Williams, I've been considering corporate law with a focus on mergers and acquisitions, possibly with some international business law. My mother's experience building a company has shown me how complex those transitions can be, especially when crossing cultural and regulatory boundaries. Richard looked surprised, then nodded appreciatively. That's quite insightful, actually. We do a considerable amount of cross-border work at my firm. I would imagine so, Gabby continued. Mom was telling me about the regulatory challenges she faced when expanding her business to include specialized medical cleaning. The compliance requirements across different health jurisdictions are fascinating from a legal perspective. I watched my daughter with growing amazement. Not only was she presenting herself confidently in this intimidating setting, but she was actively drawing connections between my work, the work she had once minimized, and her own professional aspirations. The meal progressed, and gradually, the dynamic shifted. Richard began asking me more substantive questions about business strategy and Chicago's commercial real estate market. Pamela, though still reserved, showed genuine interest when I described my property renovation approach. Jason relaxed visibly as the conversation warmed, occasionally adding his own observations about business models he had studied in his coursework. By dessert, something unexpected had happened. What began as an evaluation, the wealthy, established couple assessing the immigrant mother of their son's girlfriend, had transformed into something closer to a collegial exchange among peers. As we prepared to leave, Richard reached for the check. "Please, allow me," he said. "It's been a genuinely illuminating evening." "Thank you," I replied, "but I insist we split it." I reached for my purse. I value equality in professional and social interactions. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, followed by a more genuine smile than he had offered all evening. Of course, very reasonable. Outside the restaurant, as we waited for the valet to bring our cars, Pamela drew me slightly aside. "Elena," she said, her voice lower, more authentic than the social tone she had maintained throughout dinner. "I must confess I had preconceptions before tonight. Jason mentioned that Gabby's mother was in cleaning services, and I made certain assumptions." I nodded, neither confirming nor challenging her self-awareness. "I'm glad to have been corrected," she continued. "What you've built is remarkable. And your daughter." She glanced toward Gabby, who was laughing at something Jason had said. "She's quite extraordinary. That blend of intelligence and conviction is rare." "Yes," I agreed, watching my daughter. "She is extraordinary, though I can take only partial credit. Much of who she is comes from her own determination to create her path." Pamela studied me for a moment. "Richard and I would like to have you both over to our home soon. A proper dinner, not a restaurant meeting. Perhaps you could teach me to make those empanadas Gabby mentioned? They sound delightful." The invitation was unexpected, less a social obligation than a genuine extension of interest. "I'd like that," I said. "Honestly." As our cars arrived, Gabby approached and hugged me tightly. "Ready to go, Mom?" "Yes, mija. Let's go home." In the car, Gabby was unusually quiet, staring out the window at the Chicago skyline lit up against the night sky. "You were wonderful tonight," I said finally. "The way you spoke about your aspirations, how you connected them to my work, I was very proud." She turned to look at me, her expression serious. I meant every word. I've been thinking a lot about my future lately, about what really matters to me. And I realized that all this time I've been running from exactly the things that could give me strength. "What do you mean?" "Our heritage, your story, the values you tried to teach me that I thought were old-fashioned or irrelevant." She shook her head ruefully. "All those years watching you build something from nothing, seeing your determination and work ethic, those were the real lessons I should have been learning, not how to fit in with people like Pamela and Richard." I drove in silence for a moment, processing her words. "There's value in both worlds, Gabby. Learning to navigate different environments, different expectations, that's a skill too. I never wanted you to reject opportunities for advancement or connection. I just hoped you wouldn't reject your roots in the process." "I know that now." she said softly. And I'm trying to find the balance. When we arrived home, my home, Gabby surprised me by asking if she could stay the night. Like we used to do on weekends when I was younger, she explained. I miss this place. I miss you. I prepared her old room, which I had maintained exactly as she had left it before college. The purple walls she had insisted on. As a teenager, the bulletin board still pinned with concert tickets and high school achievement certificates. The bookshelf filled with her childhood favorites alongside SAT prep guides. As I was about to wish her goodnight, she hesitated in the doorway of her room. Mom? Can I ask you something? Of course. Are you happy? With your life, your choices? Do you ever regret coming to America, doing all this alone? The question caught me off guard. In all our recent reconnection, all our conversations about heritage and identity, Gabby had never asked about my personal fulfillment, only my experiences, my journey, my accomplishments. I have regrets, I said honestly. I regret not finishing my education in Colombia. I regret the years of estrangement from my parents. I regret some business decisions I made early on from inexperience. I paused, considering her real question. But coming to America? Having you? Building this life? No. Those choices gave me purpose, challenge, growth. Even in the hardest moments, I knew I was creating something meaningful. Gabby nodded slowly. I think I've been afraid, she admitted. Afraid that acknowledging where we came from, your struggles, our modest beginnings, would somehow limit me. But watching you tonight with the Williamses, seeing how you've succeeded on your own terms without compromising who you are, it showed me a different kind of strength. I reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture as natural as breathing, despite the years when such physical affection had been rejected. There is no power in denial, mija. The power comes from incorporation, weaving all the threads of your experiences, your heritage, your ambitions into something uniquely yours. She leaned into my touch, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I want to be more like you, she whispered. Not less. I think I've finally figured that out. That night, I lay awake long after Gabby had fallen asleep, replaying the day's events. From making empanadas in my kitchen to presenting our heritage at Northwestern, from the unexpected validation of Jason's parents to this heart-to-heart with my daughter, it felt like we had traversed years of emotional distance in a single day. The journey wasn't complete. There would be backsliding, moments when old patterns reasserted themselves. Gabby was still young, still finding herself, still navigating the complex interplay of cultures and expectations that defined her existence. But something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer running from her roots, but turning back to examine them with new eyes, with growing appreciation. In the morning, I woke early as usual and went to my small garden. The herbs were dewy. In the early light, their scent sharp and clean in the cool air. I heard the back door open and turned to see Gabby stepping outside, wrapped in the old robe she had left behind when she moved to her apartment. "You still do this," she said, gesturing to my morning ritual among the plants. "Every day?" I nodded. "It connects me to your grandmother, to the mountains of home. No matter what challenges the day brings, this moment grounds me." She came to stand beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. "Show me? Which herbs are which? What they're used for?" And so I did, pointing out each plant, explaining its uses in Colombian cooking, sharing the folk remedies my mother had taught me. Gabby listened intently, occasionally asking questions or sharing fragmented memories of dishes I had prepared throughout her childhood. "I'd like to cook more," she said as we headed back inside. "Not just empanadas for special events, but every day. Meals. The foods you used to make when I was little." "I'd be happy to teach you," I replied, starting the coffee. "Whenever you have time between classes." She leaned against the counter, watching me measure grounds into the filter. Actually, I was thinking, what if I moved back home for my last year? Not because I need to, the apartment is great, but because I want to spend time with you, to learn these things before I graduate and start my career. The coffee. Scoop paused in midair. Move back home? I repeated, unsure I had heard correctly. Gabby nodded, looking both determined and vulnerable. I've missed so much, pushed away so much, and now I realize I have only a year left before law school, before everything changes again. I don't want to waste it. I carefully set down the by scoop, buying myself a moment to process this unexpected proposal. Gabby, I would love to have you home again, but are you sure? Your apartment is closer to campus. Your friends are there. My friends can visit here, she said firmly, and the commute isn't that bad. Plus, she hesitated, then plunged forward. I was thinking I could intern at Morales Cleaning Services this summer. Learn the business properly, if you're serious about that offer. I was completely serious, I assured her. But law firms typically pay their summer interns much better than we could. It's not about the money. It's about understanding what you've built, maybe helping to take it to the next level. Her eyes lit up with genuine excitement. I was thinking about the Northwestern memorial contract. Their legal department will need to review all the compliance protocols. What if I shadowed that process? It would be an amazing experience for business law, and I could help ensure everything aligns perfectly with healthcare regulations. The thoughtfulness of the suggestion, the way she was already thinking about contributing to the business rather than simply observing it, touched me deeply. That's actually a very good idea. Luis has been saying we need more legal oversight as we expand into specialized medical facilities. See? I could be useful. She grinned, looking suddenly young and eager, reminding me of the little girl who had once followed me around work sites, proudly telling everyone her mother was the boss. You always could have been, I said softly. The door was always open, Gabby. Her smile faltered slightly. I know. I was the one who closed it, but I'm opening it again now, if that's okay. I crossed the kitchen and pulled her into a tight embrace. More than okay, mija. It's what I've hoped for all along. We stood there in my sunlit kitchen, the coffee maker gurgling in the background, the scent of herbs drifting in from the garden, mother and daughter finding our way back to each other after years of growing apart, not through dramatic gestures or grand apologies, but through small, practical steps. Cooking together, working together, living together again. Later that day, as Gabby packed a small bag of essentials to take back to her apartment, she would return next weekend to begin moving her things home properly. I made a call to Luis. Remember that legal internship position we discussed creating eventually? I asked when he answered. I think we should implement it this summer. My daughter has expressed interest. Luis's surprise was audible. Gabby wants to intern with us? The same Gabby who could barely acknowledge where you worked at the holiday party? People change, I said simply. Sometimes they just need to see things clearly. Like seeing their mother's name on their apartment lease? He chuckled. Well, if she has half your business sense, she'll be an asset to the company. She has her own strengths, I replied, watching through the window as Gabby carefully selected a few sprigs of herbs from the garden to take back with her. And she's finally ready to develop them without hiding where she comes from. After Gabby left, promising to return the following weekend to begin her move, I sat at my kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee. The house felt different somehow. Warmer, more alive with possibility. For years, I had furnished it with memories of a happier past, preserving Gabby's room exactly as she had left it, maintaining traditions she had rejected, hoping that someday she would return to them with new appreciation. That day had finally come. Not because I had chased her or pushed her or demanded her recognition, But because I had finally stood in my full truth, allowing her to see me completely, not just as her mother, but as Elena Morales, a woman who had built something significant from humble beginnings and refused to be diminished by anyone's perceptions, even her daughter's. The revelation of my name on her apartment lease had been merely the beginning. The true revelation was in Gabby's growing understanding that her heritage, the very thing she had sought to minimize, could be a source of strength rather than limitation. As I sipped my coffee, I thought about calling my parents in Colombia. It had been months since our last stilted conversation, years since we had spoken with real warmth. Perhaps it was time to begin healing that relationship too, to close the circle of reconciliation that had begun with my daughter. After all, if Gabby could learn to see beyond her embarrassment to the value of her roots, perhaps my parents could see beyond their disappointment to the worth of the life I had created. It was worth trying at least, because if these past weeks had taught me anything, it was that it's never too late to reclaim what matters most, the connections that give meaning to all our achievements, all our struggles, all our triumphs. I picked up my phone and dialed the international number, listening to the distant ring and preparing myself for whatever reception awaited. Some bridges take longer to rebuild than others, but the work is always worthwhile in the end. The call to my parents went better than I expected. After the initial awkwardness, the long pauses, the careful navigation around old wounds, we found a tentative rhythm of conversation. My mother asked about Gabby, and for the first time in years, I shared good news without editing or softening the reality of our strained relationship. "She's coming back home," I told her, "to live with me for her final year of college." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken emotion. "That's good, Elenita," my mother finally said, her voice softer than I'd heard it in decades. "Family should be together when possible." Coming from her, the woman who had turned away when I needed her most, these words carried layers of meaning. Not quite an apology, but perhaps an acknowledgement of what had been lost. "She wants to learn more about Colombia," I continued. "About our traditions, our food. She's even talking about visiting someday, meeting you and Papa." Another silence, this one broken by my father's voice in the background, asking questions I couldn't quite hear. "Your father wants to know if she speaks Spanish," my mother translated. "Some. Not as much as she used to, but she wants to practice more." The conversation continued in this vein, cautious, hopeful, punctuated by the ghosts of old disagreements. Before we hung up, my mother surprised me. "I have been watching your Facebook page," she admitted. "The photos of your business, your awards, the new house." A pause. "We are proud, Elena. We should have said it sooner." The words I had waited half a lifetime to hear, delivered across thousands of miles with the same matter-of-fact tone she might use to comment on the weather. Yet they washed over me like a benediction. "Thank you, Mama," I managed, my voice thick with emotion. "That means a lot to me." After hanging up, I sat in my garden until sunset, processing the conversation. The reconciliation with my parents would be a longer road than the one with Gabby. Decades of distance and disapproval couldn't be erased in a single phone call. But a door had opened, just a crack, enough to let in a sliver of possibility. The summer arrived with a wave of changes. Gabby moved back home, transforming her childhood bedroom into a space that reflected her evolving identity. The purple walls remained, but posters of pop stars gave way to framed maps of Colombia and black and white photographs of Bogotá that she had found online. She hung her Northwestern pennant beside a vintage Colombian flag I had kept stored away, creating a visual representation of her dual heritage. Her internship at Morales Cleaning Services began in June. I had worried she might find the work beneath her, a pre-law student with her sights set on corporate firms dealing with cleaning contracts and compliance regulations, but she approached it with surprising enthusiasm. "This is fascinating," she said one evening, looking up from a stack of documents she had spread across our dining room table. The regulatory overlap between healthcare facilities and commercial cleaning creates so many potential liability issues. How did you navigate all this when you first expanded? Carefully, I laughed. And with a lot of help from people who knew more than I did. I sat down across from her. That's another lesson your grandmother taught me. Elenita, smart people know what they don't know. Gabby nodded thoughtfully. That's what impresses me most about your business model. You've created these specialized divisions with expert advisors, but maintained centralized quality control. It's actually brilliant from an operational perspective. The genuine interest in her voice, the respect implicit in her analysis. These were gifts I had stopped expecting years ago. I tried not to show how deeply they affected me, how completely they healed old wounds. Luis deserves much of the credit for the operational structure, I said. He brought systems thinking that complemented my relationship-based approach. You two make a good team, she observed. I've been watching how you interact in meetings. You focus on the client, perspective, the human element, while he emphasizes processes and efficiency. Together you cover all the bases. Her perception surprised me. In just a few weeks of interning, she had identified dynamics that had taken Luis and me years to articulate and leverage effectively. That's very insightful, Gabby. She smiled, a hint of her old confidence returning, but now tempered with something new. Humility, perhaps. I'm trying to really see things now. Not just how they appear on the surface or how I want them to be. This new attentiveness extended beyond the office. At home, Gabby began asking questions about photographs she had passed unnoticed for years, artifacts from Colombia that decorated our living spaces, stories behind the music I played while cooking. Her curiosity seemed insatiable, as if she were trying to reclaim all the heritage she had previously rejected. One Sunday afternoon, I found her in the attic, surrounded by boxes of family memorabilia. "Mom, I found your college notebooks from Bogotá," she said excitedly. "Your economics notes are so detailed, and they're all in this beautiful handwriting." I knelt beside her, surprised she had uncovered those particular relics. "I was studying to be an accountant before I came to America. Did I ever tell you that?" She shook her head, carefully turning pages filled with my younger self's handwriting. "No, you never mentioned it." 2 years of university, completed. The 3rd year was interrupted when I became pregnant with you. I traced the margin, notes with my fingertip. Sometimes I think about finishing that degree even now. Gabby looked up sharply. "You should do it, Mom. Northwestern has an executive program for business professionals without completed degrees. Some of the credits might even transfer." The suggestion caught me off guard. At my age, with a full-time business to run? Why not? You're always telling me education has no expiration date. Her eyes lit up with the same determination she showed when arguing a point in class. Think about it. Elena Morales, CEO and college graduate. You could walk across the stage in a cap and gown, and I could cheer embarrassingly loud. The image made me laugh, the role reversal of my daughter attending my graduation. But beneath the humor, the idea took root. Why not, indeed? I had built a business, raised a daughter, created a life in a foreign country. Completing a degree that had been interrupted by circumstance seemed almost straightforward by comparison. "I'll think about it," I promised. "Good, because I already bookmarked the application page on your computer." Her presumption might have irritated me once, but now it warmed me. This was the Gabby I had glimpsed throughout her childhood, determined, slightly bossy, but fundamentally caring. The idea of returning to school remained a background hum as summer progressed. Gabby continued her internship, impressing Luis and the management team with her insights and work ethic. I found myself increasingly delegating responsibilities to her, not because she was my daughter, but because she had earned that trust through performance. In July, we hosted a company picnic at a local park. Employees and their families gathered for food, games, and relaxation, a tradition I had started years ago to build community among our diverse workforce. Gabby had attended these events as a child, but had begun avoiding them in her teens, finding excuses to be elsewhere. This year, not only did she attend, but she took an active role in planning activities and making sure new employees felt welcomed. I watched from a distance as she chatted easily with our newest cleaning team members, recent immigrants from El Salvador and Ukraine, switching between Spanish and English as needed, helping translate for those still learning the language. Guadalupe, one of our longest-serving employees who had known Gabby since she was a toddler, sidled up to me with a knowing smile. "Your daughter has changed," she observed. "She looks people in the eyes now, remembers their names." "Yes," I agreed. "She's finding her way back to herself, I think." Guadalupe nodded sagely. "Sometimes the children need to wander before they remember the path home." She patted my arm. "You were wise to wait, not chase." Later that afternoon, as the picnic wound down, I noticed Gabby deep in conversation with Jason. They sat slightly apart from the crowd, their expressions serious. Jason seemed to be arguing a point, gesturing emphatically, while Gabby shook her head, her posture unyielding. When she rejoined me to help pack up the remaining food, her mood had shifted, a tightness around her mouth, a distracted quality to her responses. "Everything okay with Jason?" I asked carefully as we loaded containers into my car. She sighed, closing the trunk with more force than necessary. "He thinks I'm making a mistake. Spending the summer interning at a cleaning company instead of at his father's law firm." The dismissive wording, clearly Jason's, not Gabby's, sent a familiar pang through me. "I see." "No, you don't," she said quickly, "because I told him he's the one making a mistake. That what I'm learning at Morales is more valuable than anything I'd get fetching coffee and making copies for entitled partners who'd see me as nothing but diverse talent for their recruitment brochures." The fierceness in her voice surprised me. "That's quite a stance." She leaned against the car, crossing her arms. "He doesn't get it, Mom. He keeps saying I'm wasting my potential and limiting my network by working with you instead of making connections at top firms." Her expression hardened, as if those connections are more important than understanding how a real business operates from the ground up. I chose my words carefully, not wanting to interfere in their relationship, yet proud of her perspective. Different paths work for different people, Mija. Jason's background gives him certain advantages in traditional corporate settings. Your experience gives you others. Exactly. She pushed off from the car, pacing slightly. He can afford to follow the conventional route because he's already inside the club. I need to build something different, something that uses everything I am, not just the parts that fit into his world. The insight she expressed, the recognition that her mixed heritage and complex background could be strengths rather than liabilities, was exactly what I had hoped she would discover. Not because I had pushed or preached, but because she had lived the alternative and found it wanting. "Have you told him this?" I asked. "I'm trying to. He just doesn't listen." She ran a hand through her hair, frustration evident. "He keeps talking about how his dad could open doors for me, as if that's all that matters." I nodded, understanding the fundamental disconnection. For people who have always had doors open automatically, they can't imagine why anyone would choose a different entrance. Gabby looked at me with sudden clarity. "That's it exactly. He can't understand why I'd choose to build my own door when he's offering a key to the existing ones." The conversation shifted something between us, mother and daughter becoming peers in a way, two women navigating the complex intersections of ambition, culture, and relationship. I didn't offer advice about Jason. She didn't ask for it. Instead, we discussed the broader principles at stake: authenticity versus assimilation, independence versus advantage, defining success on one's own terms. In the weeks that followed, I noticed Gabby spending less time with Jason and more at the office, throwing herself into projects with increased focus. She began developing a comprehensive compliance guide for our medical cleaning division, an initiative that combined her legal knowledge with growing business acumen. This could become a selling point, she explained as she presented the draft to Luis and me. Most cleaning companies provide basic training manuals. This is different. It's a complete regulatory navigation system with visual protocols, citation, references, and liability prevention measures. Luis whistled, impressed. This is professional grade work, Gabby. We could market this as a distinct competitive advantage. Pride swelled in my chest as I watched my daughter light up under the genuine professional recognition, not as Elena's daughter, but as a valuable contributor with unique insights. I was thinking, she ventured, that I could continue developing this during the school year. Maybe for independent study credit if my department approves. We'd be happy to have your continued input, I assured her. But school comes first. Actually, she hesitated. I've been meaning to talk to you about that. I'm considering adding a business minor to my pre-law track. After this summer, I'm seeing how valuable business fundamentals are for corporate law practice. The shift in her academic planning reflected the deeper shift in her perspective, embracing rather than distancing herself from the business world I inhabited, not following my exact path, but integrating elements of it into her own journey. August brought a new development. The Northwestern Memorial contract was finalized, making Morales Cleaning Services the primary sanitation provider for one of Chicago's premier healthcare institutions. To celebrate the achievement, the hospital administration invited us to a formal reception recognizing key service partners. You'll come with me, I told Gabby, not a question but an assumption. She had been instrumental in reviewing the contract's compliance aspects during her internship. Of course, she replied without hesitation. Should I invite Jason too? The question surprised me, given their recent tensions. If you'd like to. She considered for a moment, then shook her head. No, I think this should be just us. You and me. A professional evening. The night of the reception, we prepared together at home. I wore my best business attire, a tailored navy suit with subtle gold accessories. Gabby emerged from her room. In a sleek black dress accented with a hand-embroidered Colombian shawl I recognized from my collection. Is it okay that I borrowed this? She asked, adjusting the colorful fabric around her shoulders. It seemed appropriate, professional, but with a personal touch. The sight of my daughter deliberately incorporating a piece of our heritage into her professional presentation brought unexpected emotion. It's perfect, I assured her. My mother gave me that shawl when I left Colombia. Gabby's eyes widened. I didn't know that. I can choose something else. No, I said firmly. She would be proud to see you wearing it. As am I. The reception was held in one of the hospital's elegant conference centers, transformed for the evening with subdued lighting and tasteful decorations. Hospital administrators mingled with representatives from various service partners, medical equipment providers, food service companies, and now, us. Dr. Torres, whom we had met during the investor dinner months ago, greeted us warmly. Elena, Gabriella, wonderful to see you both. The mother-daughter business team. Gabby smiled confidently. I'm just an intern learning from the best, Dr. Torres. But thank you. Throughout the evening, I watched with quiet satisfaction as Gabby navigated the professional environment with grace. She discussed compliance protocols with the hospital's legal team, asked insightful questions about interdepartmental coordination with administrators, and represented our company's values seamlessly when speaking with other attendees. During a moment alone, as we sipped sparkling water by one of the tall windows overlooking the Chicago skyline, I couldn't help but comment on the transformation. You're a natural at this, you know. The professional networking, the substantive discussions. You've always had these skills, but now you're using them differently. She considered this, watching the city lights below. I used to think success meant escaping, from our neighborhood, from my background, from anything that marked me as different. She adjusted the Colombian shawl around her shoulders. Now I realize success is about integration, not escape. Bringing all the parts of myself to the table. That's wisdom many people never achieve, I observed. I had a good teacher, she replied, bumping her shoulder gently against mine, even when I wasn't listening. As the evening wound down, the hospital's CEO requested everyone's attention for a brief ceremony recognizing the new partnerships. After acknowledging several other service providers, he turned to us. Finally, I'd like to welcome our newest key partner, Morales Cleaning Services, represented tonight by founder and CEO Elena Morales and her daughter, Gabriela, who serves out as legal compliance intern while completing her pre-law studies at Northwestern. Applause filled the room as we stepped forward. The CEO continued, "What particularly impressed our selection committee was not just Morales Cleaning's outstanding technical capabilities and specialized medical cleaning expertise, but their commitment to employee development and community engagement. Elena has built a company that reflects the best of Chicago's entrepreneurial spirit and diverse strengths." As we accepted the official welcome, Gabby whispered to me, "He'd never guess you started by cleaning houses with me strapped to your back, would he?" "That's the point, mija," I whispered back. "We contain multitudes. Always have." Later that night, as we drove home through Chicago's lit streets, Gabby was uncharacteristically quiet, staring out the window with a pensive expression. "Everything okay?" I asked, glancing over at her. "I broke up with Jason today," she said, simply. Before the reception. I kept my expression neutral, though the news didn't entirely surprise me given their recent tensions. "I see. Do you want to talk about it?" She sighed, adjusting the shawl still draped around her shoulders. "There's not much to say. We want different things. Or maybe we want the same things, but for completely different reasons." She turned to look at me. He couldn't understand why tonight was so important to me, being here with you, representing the company. He called it a glorified cleaning contract signing. The dismissive characterization stung, even secondhand. That shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what we do. Exactly. And I realized I don't want to spend my life explaining or apologizing for my values, my priorities. She straightened in her seat. I want someone who sees the beauty in building something meaningful from the ground up, not someone who only values what comes with established prestige. The maturity in her reflection impressed me. She wasn't rejecting Jason out of pique or in reaction to a single comment, but from a thoughtful evaluation of core values and long-term compatibility. "Are you okay?" I asked, concerned less about the breakup itself than its emotional impact. Surprisingly, yes. She gave me a small, genuine smile. It feels like removing something that doesn't fit anymore. Like those designer shoes I used to squeeze my feet into because they were the right brand. The analogy made me laugh. The ones that gave you blisters for weeks? Exactly. I finally admitted they were a size too small and gave them away. She laughed too, the sound free and unforced. Some things aren't worth the pain just for appearances. We drove in comfortable silence for a while, the city flowing past our windows. "Mom?" she said eventually. "Thank you for not saying I told you so. It about Jason, about all of it." "I would never," I replied truthfully. "Your journey is your own. I'm just glad to be part of it again." She reached across the console and squeezed my hand briefly. Me too. The remainder of August passed, in a blur of activity. Gabby prepared to return to classes while maintaining a part-time role at Morales Cleaning, focusing on developing the compliance guide she had initiated during her internship. I juggled the implementation of the Northwestern memorial contract with preliminary research into the executive education program Gabby had suggested. One evening, as we sat in the garden enjoying the last of summer's warmth, Gabby brought up a subject that had been occasionally mentioned but never fully explored. "I've been thinking about that trip to Colombia," she said, picking a sprig of mint and rolling it between her fingers, releasing its scent. "What if we went during winter break? Not just to visit, but to really see where you came from, meet your parents if they're willing." The proposal was both exciting and anxiety-inducing. I hadn't returned to Colombia in over 15 years, and my last visit had been strained. My parents still uncomfortable with my unmarried status, still grieving the educated daughter who had abandoned her potential for what they saw as a lesser life in America. "They're getting older," I said thoughtfully. "Your grandfather has heart problems. It might be good to see them while we can." "And I'd like to know them," Gabby admitted, "to understand that part of my history before it's too late." We began making plans that night, researching flights, discussing regions to visit beyond Bogotá, creating a tentative itinerary that would allow us to experience both family reconciliation and cultural exploration. As we worked side by side, I marveled at how far we had come from that painful moment outside her apartment building when she had introduced me simply as Elena to her friends. The daughter who had once been ashamed of her cleaning lady mother now proudly wore Colombian textiles to professional events, spoke Spanish in public without self-consciousness, and planned a journey to embrace the roots she had previously rejected. The transformation hadn't happened through confrontation or ultimatum, but through revelation. The simple truth of my name on a document, the undeniable reality of who I was beyond the limited perception she had cultivated. That single moment of recognition had opened a door through which authentic connection could finally flow, allowing Gabby to see not just her mother, but herself more clearly. Our journey wasn't complete. There would still be moments of tension, old habits reasserting themselves, cultural bridges to cross. The upcoming trip to Colombia would likely surface new challenges, old wounds, unexpected emotions. But we would face them together, no longer separated by shame or pretense. As summer drew to a close and the first crisp hints of autumn touched the air, I reflected on the seasons of our relationship, the warm, close years of her childhood, the cooling distance of adolescence, the winter of her rejection in college, and now this new spring of reconnection and growth. What had changed wasn't just Gabby's perception of me, but her understanding of herself, that she could be both the accomplished Northwestern student and the daughter of an immigrant cleaning lady, that her heritage wasn't a limitation to overcome, but a foundation that gave her unique perspective and strength. That authenticity, not assimilation, was the path to genuine belonging. My name on her lease had been the catalyst, but the transformation that followed was her own journey. A reclamation of identity, a reconciliation of worlds, a return not to childhood dependence, but to adult connection grounded in mutual respect and shared history. As we sat in the garden that evening, finalizing our travel plans to Colombia, I silently thanked whatever twist of fate had brought about that plumbing issue in her building, forcing the revelation that opened the door to everything that followed. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the simplest truths, finally acknowledged. Our trip to Colombia during winter break was everything I had hoped for and more. A journey of rediscovery for me and revelation for Gabby. Bogotá welcomed us with crisp mountain air and streets decorated for Christmas, the city of my youth. Transformed, yet somehow familiar. My parents met us at the airport, two elderly figures standing tentatively among the crowd of waiting families. My father, once tall and imposing, now stooped with age but still dignified in his carefully pressed shirt. My mother, her face mapped with new lines but her eyes the same deep brown that I saw every day in my mirror. They spotted us before we saw them, and I watched their expressions shift from anxiety to recognition to wonder as they took in the sight of their granddaughter, a young woman they had never met, carrying their features mixed with others. Living bridge between worlds. The reunion was awkward at first, constrained by years of distance and the language barrier that made Gabby's communication with them halting and formal. But my mother, ever practical, solved this by putting us all to work in her kitchen, preparing traditional holiday dishes. Cooking became our common language. Hands kneading dough, chopping vegetables, stirring pots of sancocho that filled the small apartment with familiar scents. "She has your hands, Elena," my mother observed on our third day, watching Gabby carefully. "Form arepas. Strong but gentle. Good hands for building things." The simple observation became a turning point. My parents began to see Gabby not as a symbol of my rebellion, but as a person in her own right. Intelligent, curious, eager to connect with her heritage. And Gabby began to understand the complex forces that had shaped my choices, the cultural context that made my journey to America both an act of courage and, in my parents' eyes, a kind of betrayal. "I never realized how brave you were," she told me one evening as we walked through La Candelaria, the historic neighborhood where I had spent my university days. "Coming to a new country, alone and pregnant, barely speaking the language, I would have been terrified." I was terrified, I admitted. But sometimes courage is just fear that keeps moving forward anyway. We stayed for 3 weeks, longer than originally planned. Gabby's Spanish improved dramatically with daily practice. My father, initially reserved, gradually opened up, sharing stories of his youth and his dreams for the daughter who had once been destined for a prestigious accounting career in Bogotá. "I didn't understand your America," he confessed one evening as we sat on the small balcony overlooking the city lights. "Why you would choose such a hard path when we had planned everything here for you." I didn't fully understand it either. "Papa," I replied, "I just knew I had to make my own way, for myself and for my daughter." He nodded slowly, his weathered hand covering mine. "And you did. A good way." The acknowledgement, simple as it was, healed something long broken between us. Not completely, some fractures leave permanent marks, but enough that we could build something new around the old injury. On our final night in Bogotá, my mother pressed a small velvet pouch into Gabby's hand. "This was meant for your mother's graduation," she explained. "But perhaps it was waiting for you all along." Inside was a pair of emerald earrings, small, but exquisitely cut, set in gold with delicate filigree work. "Abuela, I can't accept these," Gabby protested, recognizing their value. My mother closed Gabby's fingers over the pouch. "You can and you will. They belong to the women of our family. Now they belong to you. To remember where you come from, no matter where you go." Tears welled in Gabby's eyes as she embraced my mother, the last barrier between them dissolving in that simple exchange of heritage. We returned to Chicago in January, just before Gabby's final semester began. The city felt different somehow. Not just colder than Bogotá, but sharper, more angular, its energy more frenetic. Yet it was home. The place where we had both been, shaped and seasoned, where we had lost and found each other. Gabby wore her grandmother's emerald earrings to her first day of classes, a small but meaningful gesture that represented the integration she had achieved, no longer compartmentalizing. Her heritage, but wearing it proudly, allowing it to be seen. The semester unfolded with new rhythm. Gabby continued her part-time work at Morales Cleaning while completing her pre-law requirements. I enrolled in the executive education program at Northwestern, taking evening classes 2 nights a week to finally complete the accounting degree I had abandoned decades ago. "How does it feel to be a student again?" Gabby asked after my first week of classes. "Terrifying," I admitted, "and exhilarating." "Welcome to my world," she laughed. We developed new routines, study sessions at the dining room table, her law texts spread beside my accounting materials, Quick Spanish conversations while preparing dinner. Weekend meetings at the office where Gabby's compliance guide was being implemented across our growing medical division. In March, an unexpected opportunity arose. Dr. Torres from Northwestern Memorial called to discuss expanding our contract to include additional hospital facilities in their network. "Your team has exceeded expectations," he told me. "Particularly, the compliance system your daughter developed. Several of our department heads have commented that it's the most comprehensive they've seen." Pride swelled as I relayed the praise to Gabby that evening. "Your work is making a real difference, Mia," she smiled, a confident expression that reminded me of my own reflection in moments of professional triumph. "I've been thinking about that, actually, about how to expand the system for different types of medical facilities." She hesitated, then continued, "I was considering applying to law schools with strong healthcare specialization tracks, maybe developing expertise in medical facility compliance specifically." The direction surprised me, a refined focus that represented neither simple imitation of my path nor complete rejection of it. Instead, she was creating something uniquely her own that built upon our shared experiences. "That sounds perfect for you," I said honestly. Spring brought more changes. Gabby was accepted to several top law schools, ultimately choosing University of Chicago with its strong healthcare law program. Luis and I finalized plans to open a dedicated training center for medical cleaning technicians, implementing Gabby's compliance protocols as the core curriculum. And I received an unexpected call from Rosa, my oldest friend. "Elena, I'm thinking of selling the bakery," she told me. "My arthritis is getting worse, and my children aren't interested in taking over," and the news saddened me. Her Colombian bakery had been a community touchstone for decades, a place where immigrants could taste home and share stories. "What will you do?" I asked. "That's why I'm calling," she replied. "I wondered if you might be interested in buying it. Not to run yourself, you have the cleaning business. But perhaps as an investment, to keep it in our community?" I considered the proposition carefully. Though primarily focused on cleaning services and real estate, the idea of preserving this cultural landmark appealed to me. That evening, I discussed it with Gabby. "It's not strictly a business decision," I admitted. "The return wouldn't match other investments, but the bakery means something to our community." Gabby's eyes lit up with unexpected enthusiasm. "What if we made it more than a bakery? What if it became a cultural center too? A place for language classes, cooking demonstrations, community events?" Her vision expanded my thinking. Not just preservation, but evolution, honoring the past while creating new possibilities. "That would require significant renovation," I noted. "Additional investment." "I know," she nodded, already sketching ideas on a notepad. "But imagine what it could become. A bridge between generations, between cultures, like what we've found together this year." The metaphor wasn't lost on me. What had begun with my name on her apartment lease had evolved into something neither of us could have imagined, a genuine partnership that honored our differences while building on our shared heritage and complementary strengths. By May, as Gabby prepared for graduation, we had purchased Rosa's bakery and begun planning its transformation into Sabor y Cultura, flavor and culture, a combined cafe and community space. Rosa would stay on as a consultant and teacher, passing down traditional recipes to a new generation of bakers. Gabby's graduation ceremony fell on a perfect spring day, the Northwestern campus resplendent with flowering trees and proud families. I sat in the audience, watching as she crossed the stage to receive her diploma, the emerald earrings from her grandmother catching the sunlight. As we celebrated afterward with a small gathering at our home, Luis and his family, Rosa, several of Gabby's friends who had become regular visitors, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. Not just the past year of reconciliation, but the entire path from that young woman who had arrived in Chicago alone and pregnant, determined to create opportunity from adversity. "Penny for your thoughts," Gabby said, finding me alone in the kitchen arranging empanadas on a serving platter. "I was just thinking about journeys," I replied. "How we never really know where they'll lead when we start them." She leaned against the counter beside me, now almost my height in her graduation heels. "Like when you came to America? Or when I went to college?" "Both. All of it." I arranged the last empanada and turned to face her. "When I first arrived in Chicago, I could never have imagined owning a business, multiple properties, sending my daughter to Northwestern. And when you left for college, I could never have predicted that my name on your apartment lease would lead us back to each other, to Colombia, to this moment." Gabby smiled, taking the platter from my hands and setting it aside. Then she embraced me, a gesture that had once been rare but now felt natural again. "Thank you," she whispered, "for never giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself." "That's what mothers do, mija," I replied, holding her tight. "We see who our children really are, even when they're trying to be someone else." She pulled back slightly, her eyes bright with emotion. "And thank you for being exactly who you are, not who I wanted you to be, or who anyone else expected. Just authentically, unapologetically, Elena Morales." In that moment, standing in my kitchen with my graduate daughter, I felt the circle complete itself. The cleaning lady who had built an empire, the immigrant who had created a home, the mother who had lost and found her daughter. All these identities merged into one integrated whole, no longer compartmentalized or hidden, but acknowledged and celebrated. The revelation of my name on Gabby's apartment lease had been simply the first domino, setting in motion a cascade of truths that ultimately freed us both. Her to embrace her heritage without fear of limitation, me to stand fully in my accomplishments without minimizing my journey. As we rejoined our guests, Gabby's arm linked comfortably through mine. I knew that whatever paths we took from here, her to law school, me to new business ventures, us together to community building through Sabor y Cultura, we would walk them authentically, our steps grounded in the truth of who we were and where we had come from. Some might see just a successful businesswoman and her accomplished daughter. But we knew the deeper story of the cleaning lady who became a property owner, and the daughter who learned that true belonging never requires pretending to be someone else. Our names, our heritage, our journey, all parts of a legacy we would continue to build together, no longer separated by shame but united in pride. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.